Screamers drops the audience onto an alien planet where a mining corporation is waging literal war on its employees. The war has led to the creation of a new kind of deadly weapon, robotic murder balls called Screamers. This one isn't really talked about much, so join us as we check out this low-budget Peter Weller movie and see if it's worth revisiting. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peters and I am joined as always by Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and we talk about a movie we've watched that's really quite that simple. We're in 90 season and this episode is going to be about 1995's Screamers, starring Peter Weller. Also co-written by Dan O'Bannon, who also technically was part of the screenplay team that did Alien, which sounds impressive and that you should care and should be excited, but that script for Alien's not that good. So I'll set you up there, right? I'll set you up for that right now. There was a lot of rewrites on that Alien script. So we'll get to Screamers, which, I mean, to sum up Screamers, it is on an alien planet in the future, in the 2070s, where there is a war between a mining company who want to mine this fancy, I'll just call it unobtainium, because it may as well be called that, which magically solves the energy crisis for all humans. And the miners who don't want to dig it up because, well, it's radioactive, or at least the area it's in is releasing radioactivity because they're mining. So this war breaks out. The movie explains all this with a giant opening text scroll, which is also narrated. So you're sitting there listening to this like very robotic voice telling you all these things. But what the movie really is, it's a movie about Peter Weller, who runs the base for the Alliance, who represents the miners, and he goes out with a rookie to try and find the leader of the NEBs, which is the mining corporation, to try and broker some peace, after maybe starting to speculate and suspect that Earth is lying to them about what's going on, and there's maybe more to the story. I'll leave it there. Honestly, there's a lot of details. It's pretty convoluted. I'm sure we'll get into more of it as we describe the plot later, but that is the gist of it. I had never seen this before. Tara doesn't think she's seen it before, but she's not 100% sure. So I'll hit you with a question. Tara, what did you think of Screamers?
Yeah, I actually kind of like it. I know I know it's not very good, but I think for what it is and what it's trying to be, low budget, neat world with,
to be fair,
some cool.
I don't think it's trying to be low budget. I think it just is low budget.
Well, it is a low budget movie that's, trying to be what it can with its budget. And that is, just the best it can do, which is not bad. I don't know. It reminds me of a lot of stuff we watched in the 70s where it's like we have this high concept for a sci-fi movie, but we don't have a lot of money and we got 1 star, so let's use them. And I kind of like it. I know the original story. I didn't read it, but I read like the first page, and that it was supposed to take place. Like the Cold War that was happening was actually the war between the Soviet Union and USA at the time, and then obviously by the time the movie came around, the Soviet Union wasn't around anymore, so they adapted it to be more very sci-fi. And I like the themes from the film of like developing weapons that may ultimately lead to our demise because we're so good at killing each other, and this power-hungry corporations or whatever that are trying to do whatever it takes to get this source of energy, even at the cost of lives and environment and all that. And I think it's all there. I mean, it's underneath this pile of whatever you want to call it, low budget movie with some pretty dodgy acting. But I do still like it as a sci-fi movie. I think it's not bad.
So the original story, which by the way is by Philip K. Dick, who's obviously a very, well-known and respected science fiction writer. Are you telling me that didn't even take place on a different planet?
I don't know.
Okay.
It seems to be between the Soviet Union and USA, but that doesn't mean that they weren't on other planets fighting for the same resources. But
Yeah.
I suspect not. It was probably still Earth.
Okay. So that means like so much of this movie then is like something they've added into it as opposed to it being just this like direct adaptation of whatever he wrote. Because yeah, like, there's so much explanation in this because both sides have names that are different and made up, and there's a whole lot of like stuff they have to like get to, and that's why there's this huge opening text crawl, and why there's like what felt like 20 minutes of Peter Weller explaining stuff to the rookie later on, even though the rookie lives in this world and should, you know, on some level know a lot of it anyway. But you know, whatever. I don't think this is a good movie. I think that any of the good ideas from the original story that I can kind of see being there because you're telling me they're there, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see how that came from those themes and those ideas. I don't necessarily think the movie does a good job of actually putting those questions forward and saying, here, think about this. This is not a movie that's trying to make you think. The original Philip K. Dick story, I assume did. I assume that was a very thoughtful little piece of science fiction that was like, hey, this is where things could go. This is like something, you know, we could say about this. This just kind of turns into a really generic, low-budget sci-fi movie in that there's a lot of crappy desert locations, there's crappy industrial locations. There's a little bit of fun stop motion work at one point. That said, though, the design of the thing, which I won't spoil, that's in stop motion, definitely said, oh, this is a B movie. You can never be more than a B movie because this is too silly to be in a proper, like, you know, A-list. You know, this can't be an Alien, but this can be an Alien on board ship, which is the B movie knockoff of Alien. You know, like, that kind of idea. So I agree that the acting is bad. Even Peter Weller's shit in this movie. He's phoning it in. He does not emote like most of the time.
Have you ever seen a Peter Weller movie where he did?
Yeah, but it works in RoboCop. Right? It works in RoboCop.
I don't know. Star Trek and Buckaroo Banzai. Like, he's not a very emotive guy. Like, you get Peter Weller because he's intense. You know, he's intense because you don't know what's going on out there.
Yeah, but here's the difference though. This movie's script is terrible and constantly tries to have him saying like one-liners or witty remarks or these things that are supposed to be, oh, this is where Arnold or hell, actually, with the standard that this movie has, this is where Red Brown would wink at the audience to let you know that he's just cracked a good joke.
I don't really get that vibe from the movie, honestly.
Oh, this movie's...
I can't think of a lot of like maybe there was one-liner that was like, oh, that was kind of cheesy. No, but it mostly comes from other characters.
Maybe I've used one-liner incorrectly there, but there's a lot of lines that are supposed to sound kind of badass, or supposed to sound kind of, and not necessarily after he does something cool, just after, like, even just when he's talking to his friend early on in the film, there's a lot of little lines like going back and forth that sound like they were taken out of another movie, where it's like, okay, this is a cool line, we're going to take it and put it into this script, and Peter Weller just says it, half asleep, looking for his paycheck, just off, you know, left the camera. He's like making sure the paycheck's waiting for him, and he's just blubbering out these things, spouting exposition about these screamers, these machines that are killing people on the planet. Which we'll get to that in a second because that's a big part of the plot, obviously, because it's the title. Right, so you've got that going on. All the side actors are all terrible, right? And I'm not actually even blaming the actors per se because they're all in this movie. But from the director of...
Some of them I blame directly, yeah.
From the directors of Scanners 2 and Scanners 3, which no doubt will be bonus episodes of this show at some point after we do the original. The original won't be a bonus episode. The original is a David Cronenberg film, but Scanners 2 and 3...
Ironside. We gotta include that on the main site.
But, I didn't find a whole lot of charm in this. I felt like it was very derivative, and the argument might be there, but it's based on a Philip K. Dick story. But when I say it's derivative, I'm not even necessarily talking about the concepts that are derivative. I'm talking about the way everything looks in terms of the other movies feels derivative. The way it's written feels really cheesy. Or at the very least, it's almost a little try hard sometimes when it's, you know, trying to make the characters cool. There's some stuff towards the end of the movie where all of a sudden the music score changed to try and be this emotional track, like we're supposed to care about like two of the characters, and I'm like,
music made me laugh actually.
Yeah, and I'm like, I do not buy any of this, like this emotion between these two characters at all. You've not earned this one iota. This is terrible. And sadly, most of the action's kind of dull. You know, it's just kind of standing and shooting in one direction. There's not really much to it. There's no real sense of choreography. There's no real sense of, you know, so the direction's not good. The script's not good. The cast aren't good. So I have very little. It's not the worst. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm saying all this because there's potential in the themes that the original story is going for and what it's trying to say about humanity that I think could make for a good story and indeed a good movie, but it doesn't come anywhere. It comes out as feeling direct to video, cheap, and just in every way kind of half-assed. Everything just kind of feels like, oh, we're going through the motions. We're doing, you know.
You make it sound like they were forced to make a movie.
They might have been. Like, see, if you told me Roger Corman was like producing this, I would have believed you. I wouldn't have been surprised.
They got Dan O'Bannon because they are like, we have to write a script. Let's get the alien guy to just make it.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think Dan O'Bannon, like anything he's done, although because Alien was rewritten. I don't know if you've heard all the stories about Alien, where the original script that was written by O'Bannon and whoever the other co-writer was.
Is it one of those accidental masterpieces?
Well, it was full of basically when they read the script, they said this is mostly shit, but this chestburster bit's really good. Because the original script, like, all the characters had like really sci-fi names like Zoltar and Bizu and, you know, like,
nice.
And it was full of like silly names. It was very campy and all these other things. Whereas, you know, I mean, I guess, okay, I'd forgotten that he did Return of the Living Dead, which has got a bit of a fan base, but there's not a lot of things that he's like been connected to over the years that have, you know. Oh no, okay, I take it back. He was involved with Total Recall. I will.
Another Philip K. Dick adaptation.
But I wonder how much of that is the fact that you've got Paul Verhoeven in charge, there to sort of turn it into the movie, versus I've closed the page now. Whoever did this, Johnny Nobody.
Yeah, I don't know the director.
Hold on a second. I'm getting it back.
I don't know. I disagree that I think that everybody was like half-assing it. I think maybe they just didn't have the budget to do very much. So they got, you know, they spent their money on getting a name, which is Peter Weller. And then the rest of the budget went to, you know, some of the special effects they had to do. And so they cut costs on actors. And, you know, maybe they could have done with some better lighting at some points and a better soundtrack that makes some more sense. Stuff like that. But it does remind me of a B movie that I do find kind of fun. And maybe you don't have the right kind of nostalgia yet for this time period, where like when we view something from the 70s or 80s that's a B movie, that we can kind of forgive it for the really dumb stuff, but we don't for some reason for the 90s yet. But I think I'm already there. You know, I've got a few years on you. So I can have fun with it. And I had fun with this movie.
Yeah, I think so much of it just really feels undercooked. It feels like they just wanted to make an action sci-fi movie, and everything else is just like the justification for doing that, you know? Mm-hmm. Which is why I don't think the themes really come across all that well. Like, you know, you tell me it's about this thing, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see like how it comes from that, and how, you know, how that's like the genesis of what the story is. But in the movie, it's basically just and it's just for some tension and like. This is, you know, what the characters need to have to be scared of and building up to this, but to the point where when it gets to the last like 15 minutes and it's trying to do these bigger sci-fi ideas, which I mean conceptually I don't have a problem with any of them. I've liked them in many other things. It all feels a bit flat and feels a bit hollow because it doesn't feel like the movie's really earned or been really poking at these big humanity questions the whole time.
I think if you remove the film and you just go off of the script, I bet it's a pretty faithful adaptation of the story, because the concepts to me actually do work really well. And I do think that, you know, some of the ideas that they bring up, even when they introduce the little boy character in it, is actually quite creepy. Like if you were just reading it, you're like, oh, that's like pretty creepy what it's trying to do. But when you get when you actually see it, because it's a low budget sci-fi, they don't quite get that feeling right. They probably have an inexperienced director. Like I said, I didn't really look it up, so I don't know. But, you know, in the hands of a better director, I think this actually could have been a great sci-fi movie. Maybe a little bit tropey because, you know, it's an older story and it's already been adapted. And, you know, we've seen movies like Ex Machina now, which are clearly much better, and or try to take at least one side of this thing and make something out of it where it's more modern and whatnot. But I do think that the core ideas in this are actually quite good, which is why I'm giving it more of a pass than you are. But, you know, I do, as a sci-fi film, I think it's a neat concept.
I agree the core concept is a good idea. I just don't think anything else is. Like, everything else is kind of mediocre to shit. Like, that's the scale of everything else in the movie.
Well, I mean, yeah, a lot of the acting is pretty terrible, and some of the characters are, yeah, they're just not good. And I do definitely think they got some bad actors for this. People who are really.
It's not just the actors though. The dialogue's terrible though. It's not just the actors. The dialogue is really try hard. It's trying really hard to make the characters sound cool and badass, like constantly. Like, see when they run into the other group of characters we meet in the middle, like every single one of them, it's like, oh, you know, like the woman says like, oh, I'm so and so Pittsburgh or something. Everything's meant to sound cool and sexy between them, and you know, the
clearly has the hots for him though.
The aggressive. Yeah, but even that feels forced though, just because it's like, oh, like we have to have a love interest, we have to have a romantic element of sorts, and it doesn't feel believable. It feels just completely shoehorned in because it's a movie, and movies, especially in this time period in the 90s, everything has to have a love interest and for the main character, every single one, and it feels really hokey to me. None of the individual elements feel like they add up. And then yeah, so you add all that on to, because the low budget stuff you can get around. Like, I would be fine with the low budget. I would be fine with them like cutting around the corners because they have to, because they can't afford to do anything better with it. But this feels like a work for hire movie to me. This does not feel like a passionate director who's like trying his best to and maybe the guy, maybe I'm being hard on the guy, maybe this was him trying his best, and if so, that's a shame. And I'm sorry, but this feels like some guy who comes in to do things like Scanners 2 and 3, who comes in to do these cheap movies because he's a cheap hire who will come in on time, and that's why they like him. He shows up and he finishes on time and under budget, and that's why he's hired. That's what this feels like to me. I don't think this movie has any real personality of its own. It feels like it's just a concoction of other things that were popular before. And I don't think the characters are particularly likable. Maybe that's partially because they're trying so hard to make them sound cool and tough, but they come off as really just, which is really annoying in a movie that's like, in theory, the theme is supposed to be poking at, you know, the true idea of humanity and the human side of ourselves, and holding on to that in some way, and not losing it and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I did think that his friend in the beginning of the film was quite likable. He was giving me Tom Sizemore vibes, maybe because he just had a bigger personality than a lot of the people in the film, and he was more realistic. But I don't remember, I don't know the actor's name or even the character's name, honestly, but from watching it. But I did think that he was a likable character.
Yeah. So I can't give it a pass just because the original story has some good sci-fi concepts in it. I don't think the movie actually capitalizes on any of them. And it's not the worst thing that I've ever watched. Don't get me wrong, like, it's relatively watchable. I was getting a little bit bored at times, but it is a relatively watchable, like, bad movie versus some stuff that's like torture to get through. But you know, I'm judging this though because like this isn't some like Full Moon Pictures release that was put out. You know, that this was an actual theater release, and it
does feel a little bit better than a Full Moon Pictures.
A little, like, not by much. Not, I mean, I'm specifically meaning 90s Full Moon Pictures. Modern Full Moon Pictures feel much worse than this. But I don't know, like, I can't give it a pass. It's a bit rough. It's a bit shit, and
okay.
It never really got beyond that. And you know, it does that thing where it's got some really tropey things in there. Like it's got like at some point something's gets electrocuted, and there's like the really cartoony like lightning effect like around them and stuff. Which, don't get me wrong, it made me smile. But like, I'm never going to take your movie seriously after a certain time period if you've got that kind of thing in it. Like, you know, we're beyond that now.
I don't know. I like retrofuturism, and the lightning effect for the 90s is one of them. To me,
that does not count as retrofuturism.
Face it, man, we're old. It's retro now.
No, that's not what I'm arguing. That does not count as retrofuturism. Is like having, you know, old style buttons and like screens, and you know, it's a design thing. The way electricity,
lightning magic is also retrofuturism.
The way electricity works is not. that I cannot get on board with that at all.
Oh, well, you must hate Star Trek: The Next Generation, because they sure used that blue lightning effect a lot.
That was a TV show. They get a pass.
It does look better than the Next Generation version.
I mean, I'm only singling that out though because it's the easy one to describe without going into spoilery stuff. But sure. There's a bunch of weird. There's a really stupid cheesy effect at the end of this actually. And it's not. I'm not critiquing it because it doesn't look. You know, it's 90s optical, maybe with a bit of CG. Like, I'm not judging it for not looking as good as it would now, or not looking as good as it could be. I'm
unfair.
I'm judging it for the creative choices that were made and how to portray the moment, on weird pauses before something happens, or just the logic of like how something. But there's I can't talk about it until we get to spoilers, but let's just say there's burning and an explosion of something that does not make any sense, and is like got this weird pause for cinematic effect in it that just looks stupid to me. No, it looks stupid. Okay, and that wasn't because like they couldn't do better at the time. This was a creative choice to pace it that way. So I will shit on it to my heart's content because they made this choice.
It's the best they could do.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting a good movie because no one talks about this. This is like, I've seen the title like on video shelves a couple of times, but no one talks about Screamers from 1995. So I was kind of getting in thinking it's probably not going to be very good. I was hoping that I would enjoy it more than I did, but I didn't find it to have much charm. Clearly, Tara does and is willing to stick up for it a little bit more.
I can't wait to watch the sequels.
Don't tell me there's sequels. Is there sequels?
Well, there's at least one.
Oh, well,
it came out mid-2000s.
Look, this honestly, this movie arguably could have been a bonus episode. So the sequel is definitely a bonus episode if we ever do it. I'll say that right now. That don't expect this on a main episode. But part of the fun when we did 70 season a couple of times, and we'll probably do again, is like not doing just the obvious movies, is finding some of the lesser known things. I suppose the difference with the 90s is that because we actually grew up in that time period and we know the decade better because we lived through it, that the stuff we don't know is probably not known because it is small. Whereas with the 70s, there's maybe actually there's more likely to be gems that have just been forgotten in time that we might uncover. Demon Seed being the crown example of that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
So yeah, but you know, so I don't know if we'll find anything special like that in the unknown stuff in the 90s, but this definitely wasn't it. So when we get to the end of the year and we're doing our top 25 sci-fi of the 90s, I'm feeling pretty confident this isn't making my list. I'm actually pretty confident it won't make your list either, because I don't think you're that delusional.
Well, it depends on how many better 90s movies there are. Isn't that one of the reasons why we picked this decade? Because we're like, is there a lot of good 90s sci-fi?
I did a preemptive list. The reason why it's 25 is because I know I can get to 25. But, you know, it would be nice to shake it up a little bit and find some stuff over the next couple months.
Yeah. As of right now, this one's looking pretty probable on my list.
That's only because you've not checked and tried to make a list yet. Maybe
you're right.
There's
just
plenty.
Going through the mind palace, I'm having a hard time, other than like the obvious Jurassic Park, to come up with some sci-fi.
You'll be fine. I have complete and utter faith in you. well, I'm questioning myself after your opinion on this movie, I suppose, but
I represent the people.
yeah, like, and I mean this is the thing. I actually do think even just that one change that you've told me about, which is this was, you know, it was still a science fiction story because it was it's advanced technology and stuff, but the idea that the original story wasn't the NEB mining corporation versus the Alliance of Earth on a different planet. Like, I do think having to stop and explain all of this really is like this big burden on the movie that does make it feel hokey in a way, because it kind of feels like, you know, they've seen other sci-fi movies, they've read sci-fi stories, and like, oh, well, it's fine, we don't have to have the US and the Soviets. What we'll do is we'll make up cool sci-fi things. And I'm not against that in general, like, lots of sci-fi does that, that's okay. But because they're trying to do all that at the same time as setting up all the stuff that's actually part of the original story, and everything else, it's a lot to get to. Whereas, you know, I don't think in this story, even knowing it's set even though the original story was the US and the Soviets, I don't think there's anything in this movie itself that feels like that's what these two factions represent. It's just faction A and faction B.
No, but I honestly, like, well, first of all, I think that it was a mistake to not to be afraid of doing an alternate future, alternate history, you know, like why not just say this never happened, like we never had the ceasefire.
I think if
just go ahead with it, you know. But
I think it frees up a lot of the storytelling to not have to explain so much if it's just it's just the US and Soviets that are still in. So, but hold on, actually, because in the movie, on Earth it's not a war. On Earth it's just a Cold War, and the fighting only happens on this planet. In the original
it's a proxy war.
Yeah. So, but in the original story though, what like.
I don't know. You kind of asked me this earlier. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure. So maybe there is still a proxy war between the U.S. and the Soviets, and it's done, you know, instead of Afghanistan, it's done on the moon or something, where there's this beryllium that they're mining or something. But what I was going to say also is that I also don't really hate the idea of it being a corporation versus like a union, you know, the workers. I think that's also kind of a neat way to fix that, you know. And maybe again, it's just the quality of the script isn't there, the quality of direction isn't there, but there actually is an interesting science fiction angle of that in this film, in this original story.
I agree. I don't hate the concept of that. Like, that's fine. I just don't think the movie does anything good with it. To the point where it makes me think of you know, I almost got like a Paul Reiser in Aliens kind of feeling to like they get like a communication at one point, you know, early on in the film from like a general who's like informing them of stuff, and I was getting kind of this vibe of like, yeah, don't trust Weyland-Yutani. Like that's what I was getting, even though it's not Weyland-Yutani. They don't represent a corporation. This is the Alliance, so they're actually the union. The corporation is the villainous side, if you want to call them that. Mm-hmm. But I was getting like Weyland-Yutani style vibes of don't trust anything they say. Like, there's clearly more to this. This is all too easy and neat and whatever.
Sounds like that was intentional.
Well, it is intentional, but there's making it intriguing where you're kind of excited for them to discover something. And the characters like react accordingly when they're skeptical, but the characters in this aren't skeptical at all. In fact, until there's actually a sign of evidence later on to suggest that they're being lied to, Peter Weller is like, he actually says, I respect him, he's a good man, and we'll do what he says.
In war times, like what else do you have to go off of? You're in this bunker literally away from your home, and you just get these orders transmitted to you, and you have to go on faith, right? I know this person is of good quality and I respect them, so therefore I'm just going to follow orders. But there is, you know, something else going on, and until that someone like shakes them up a little and says, you know, like, you really need to question what's happening here. Yeah, they don't question it. I think that's fine. What I do find questionable is that we find out that it's like a virtual reality thing where this general's being projected.
I think I know what you're going to say. Why does he walk through the door to start the scene?
Why does he walk through the door? They open the door for him.
They open the door for him. In fact, someone else walks through the door first, and then he walks through the door after him. Like there's like a red shirt who walks through the door, and then this general guy walks in. He starts talking to him, and then he starts glitching out halfway through the conversation. It turns out this is a virtual reality phone call, effectively. Or no, not virtual reality. So like a hologram phone call.
I want to say that they called it virtual reality.
Peter Sellers. Peter Weller. Peter Weller calls it virtual reality bullshit. He's actually wrong though. It's a hologram, which you could call augmented reality, but it's not virtual reality.
Yeah.
So just to correct, I mean, I don't think that's a mistake. I think he's like this grumpy guy who doesn't like this shit, so he gets it wrong. That's fine. That makes sense for his character.
Well, another thing he gets.
I wanted to go back a second because you were talking about the like in war times you trust the word of your superior.
I imagine this is what a lot of the short story is about also. So.
Right, that's all fine. The problem is that in this movie, that would be compelling if that's what the movie actually focused on. If they actually dealt with this idea of this loyal guy, Peter Weller's character, who found out he was being lied to. If that was like a major part of his arc and a major part of his story was to like sort of question those above him. But it's not really. Like, yeah, he's pissed when he finds out that he's been lied to, but ultimately it's just an inciting thing to get the rest of the plot going. It's not like this, like it's not like throughout the whole movie he's like starting to learn and to understand and question and think for himself. It's not this like arc that evolves because of what that setup is. It's just, oh, that's this, that kicks things off, so now he goes off on this adventure to do this other stuff. I don't think that's actually what the story's about, and as a result of that, it's this really sort of just rushed thing at the start of the movie. So in theory, I agree there's something to that, the idea that you believe in your superior, but because it doesn't really do anything with it afterwards, I would say that, well, it would be more believable to me or more interesting if he was actually skeptical from the get-go, because it would make him seem like less of an idiot. Whereas in the movie, it feels like he's just like a yes man until he finds out he shouldn't be a yes man, and then it's like, okay, well, no, we'll just go on with things.
Sure, I mean, it's a missed opportunity for sure. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, I think the story, everything that, even the changes that were made from the original story that I'm aware of, I think it actually is a good science fiction movie, and in the hands of someone who had like maybe not even a budget, but just a better eye for filmmaking and a better way of working with actors, could have made like a really good science fiction story.
Yeah, but I'm judging the finished film, and so much of it isn't there. So much of it is like, everything you just said there about justifying why Peter Weller's this yes man, and then like is shocked. And what part of the thing that I'm saying that this doesn't work with is that after he has this flip when he finds out that they're lying to him, like, he then criticizes the rookie for being too much of a yes man. He's like, rookie, you should question things. And I'm like, what are you saying, you hypocritical prick? You just had this change, like, today. Like, last night, you found out that you'd been lied to and that you should question things. And you're, like, giving this rookie shit for being too, like, devoted, because he's this young rookie who believes he's going to have to fight in the war. He's all honourable and noble and, I'll go and fight for my beloved Earth or whatever. He speaks like a grunt from Starship Troopers almost at points, this rookie, about how much he believes in taking down the enemy.
That's great.
So like, but that like flip in his character, and then the way he talks down to him about questioning and like getting a grasp on reality in the situation they're in, it feels quite phony because he was just as like delusional about the situation he was in.
Sure, but like in the defense of that is that this rookie is also in the same scenario that they're in, where everything's going wrong and nothing is as it seems. So like, yeah, he should be like figuring things out at the same time. Like, this isn't right. We can't just blindly follow orders anymore. Something is wrong. Everything's gone awry.
I just don't get the sense from the character that this is someone who was so sure and devoted to their cause that when it was taken away from him, that he feels like his world's changed. Like, all of a sudden, he doesn't know where he stands anymore. He just quickly says, well, I'm going to go off and talk to the enemy then, because clearly all this has been shit now. And I'm like, this should be something he has to wrestle with to get to this decision.
I suppose. Where else is he going to get answers from, though?
It's so... Yeah, but you're just justifying it with a shrug like that. Oh, where else are you going to get answers from? Well, do something with it. Make this a hard choice. Make this a choice that I can care about, where it's a character change, where he has to go through an arc where he has to actually come to this decision. The movie does nothing with any of this, and you can sort of add things to it and say this is what it could be. This is how you can justify it by using reality to kind of explain why characters are making these choices. But if it's not in the movie, if the character, if the thought process and the reason why choices are being made isn't in the movie itself, then it's not there.
I guess I didn't really wrestle with this because like the first move was made by the enemy. The enemy made like a motion of peace first. And then other things happened that made them question their own side. And
no, I wasn't thinking about this in the movie. I'm thinking about this now because you're telling me all these things are here, and I'm like, well,
okay,
kinda. I get maybe slightly if you kind of look at it from the side and squint a little bit, maybe you'll see the.
I don't put a whole lot of thought into movies, but like I don't know. I felt like there's a lot of things going on in this, and I enjoyed thinking about it. Whether or not you enjoy watching it is another question, but like the sci-fi is good in this.
What does that even mean? The sci-fi is good in this?
The sci-fi is good in this. I think that's pretty clear.
It's not clear
anyway,
at all.
We should probably move on. I want to talk about spoilers.
I just... All right, we can talk about spoilers. I for some reason, you really want to defend every little thing in this.
I like the movie. What's wrong with me taking a defensive side?
You can like the movie, but agree that most of it's shit. You do that all the time with the stuff you watch on riff tracks.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable movie. Like, just because all the ingredients say that it's not going to work doesn't mean it doesn't work.
But it doesn't work. What are you talking about?
I like it. All right, let's go into spoilers. Come on. Let's get into details here.
Okay, all right. Spoilers for Screamers. Oh god, my brain's hurt. I can't. This conversation's adding years to my life. So the movie starts with one of the NEB troops, soldiers, whatever you call them. He runs in with a message to the Alliance base, but of course he gets killed by the screamer that's outside. What is a screamer, you might ask? Because we've not really explained that super in depth yet. And to be honest, it kind of evolves as the movie goes on what a screamer is, because at first it's like, oh, they're just kind of underground phantasm balls that jump out and like cut off limbs, and this was the weapon the Alliance came up with to win this war. And all of the Alliance guys, you know, Peter Weller and everyone else, they all have this like sort of like gauntlet bracelet thing they put on, which is like a sensor that tells the screamers that they're on their side. And
I think it's supposed to cover up their pulse, they said. So like it disguises their like warm bloodedness, because that's what the screamers attack. They attack warm bodies.
Okay. You know, I saw that scene twice and I still didn't pick that up.
I mean, why just the wrist? I don't know, but
yeah,
should you have one on both wrists then? If it's like a whatever.
That's a good point. Yeah, you'd have to have it on both wrists, and that's not the only pulse in your body for a start. Like there's other pulses. That's just the most common one. Yeah. Maybe they tried to go out with a big neck brace on, and it was just too. It was too.
They would need a full full body suit.
Yeah. No, but I'm having a good funny visual in my head of Peter Weller with basically a metal neck brace, like walking out, being all stiff necked and
just his RoboCop costume.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, effectively.
Keep him cool.
Yeah, I don't. There was just a lot of things to the introductions to these characters where, you know, Peter Weller's introduced with like Mozart playing, and it's just kind of like, you know, you're trying so hard, and I guess that's just. It's kind of like describing something as cool or not, is that you just kind of have it. And obviously in a movie, like, yeah, like there's a lot of work goes into creating a feeling. So even when something is cool, yeah, there's a lot of work went into making it that way. But this movie just doesn't have it. So everything feels just kind of lame. Like there's a lot of lameness to a lot of the characters, a lot of the sets, a lot of the dialogue, certainly. So they get this message after we get the arm getting cut off of this guy, and the message is like lying there in the sand and whatever. But the screamers are basically robots that are balls with like saw blades in them, and it's the saw blades that making these noise that actually makes them sound like they're screaming, which is why they call them screamers.
They kind of look like armadillos, almost. They look almost like a small mammal with a tail or something too. Maybe they do like burrow like and curl up. I mean, I think armadillos do that too. They curl up into a ball and stuff like that.
It looked like a ball that jumped out, but then it has like attachments that sort of pop out to me. Yeah. No, I mean, I compared it to Phantasm, which is why I thought of Phantasm, but it's more like, instead of just like a blade though, it's like a saw blade and an arm comes out and stuff like that. Which, you know, whatever. Which I think inherently the visual of these things is a bit silly and kind of destined this to be a B movie. Even if everything else was good, there'd be a B movie quality to it because of these things.
I mean, they mentioned that the reason they were invented was to go back to like, we're just going back to knives. So they're just another form of the sword, but they move around on their own and they're much more advanced, obviously. But instead of bombs and nukes and radioactive stuff, we're just going back to the basics of using blades.
Yeah, and so the setup
could be a commentary on war, also. Man's eternal struggle with killing each other.
Well, obviously, I mean, if the whole theme's supposed to be the advancements going forward, the idea of it being a reference to how war weaponry started with blades, I mean, that's one thing I'll give it. I think that's actually an intentional. I mean, I don't know if it came from the movie or if it came from the original story. I'd almost be willing to bet it came from the original story.
I'd be willing to make that bet too.
Yeah, but that's an obvious thing. That's the point of that, is that it's kind of comparing the future of war to the past of war, if you will. So the start of the movie though, they get this message, but the big kind of thing that sets them off is that they're told not to really look into this peace stuff.
Isn't it?
Because the general who's glitching in the VR or the augmented reality hologram is saying that, oh no, we found this other planet that's got all this baridium in it, which is the substance they want. I always season twos. They always come in twos. Anyway, so
it's not 3, because then the leprechaun will make you his bride. Don't worry, I'll save you. I'll say bless you.
How do I respond to a reference to that awful movie? I don't know how I do that.
It's such a good movie.
And I like how you started snickering immediately because you knew what you did. You knew what you just did.
She sneezes once, she sneezes twice. She'll be my bride when she sneezes thrice.
It's not funny. It's not that funny. I don't know why you're laughing. This is...
The lip would laugh.
So yes, they're told not to contact the enemy. They're told not to put anything forward because it might jeopardize this new thing that's happening, which, as far as they are told, is they found this other planet with the substance that they wanted to mine, but there's no radiation on this planet, so this would end the war, and they're going to make contracts for everyone to be able to go and mine it there, and big happy endings coming. I was getting big cake is a lie vibes from this conversation. It all felt a bit too, oh, that sounds a little bit happy and too. It sounds like you don't want them to go and talk to the enemy because they might actually learn some things that you don't want them to learn. That's what that sounds like to me. So, right after this though, a ship crashes nearby, which was supposed to be a civilian transport ship, but it turns out to be a military vehicle, and it's full of soldiers from the same side. It's all Alliance soldiers. But this confuses Peter Weller, and he's like, he's second in command. They're like, wait, where were you going? So there's one survivor who's
full of nukes too. Like they were planning
weapons,
on a big invasion.
Yeah, they're geared up for something big. And the one survivor that they've got is the rookie that, that's who I've been calling the rookie the whole time, is they say, hey, where were you going? What was this ship for? What's happening? And he's like, oh, we were going to Triton 4, which is the planet the general told him about. It's like, wait, why are you going with weapons there? That's like the new Mecca where all the resources are, and that we're giving us the happy ending. And he's like, no, we're going to fight the NEBs, the enemy, sir. We're going to kill them all. It's like, but why? And he's like, well, it's when they mentioned they mentioned the general. He's like, wait, the general, sir? He's been dead for 2 years. And he's like, wait, what? And this is the moment where it's like, okay, we've been lied to. They've been sending us fake messages, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, Peter Wells, okay, I'm going to go speak to the NEBs then and find out what the hell's going on. But the basic gist of the opening is that they're moving on to this new planet. There's a war continuing, and they're just feeding this planet lies and saying, nah, like, just stay here. Like, this planet's basically a loss. We're effectively giving up on it, and all the fighting is going to this new planet. But if we bring you home, you'll be honest about what it was like to be there, and we don't want the rest of Earth to know. So we're just going to let you stay there until you all naturally just kind of croak.
Mm-hmm. Till the radiation gets you, or the screamers.
Yeah.
Or the other side, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of setup at the start of this movie. There's a lot of setup to get into what is basically just, let's go and talk to the leader of the enemy. I do think a lot of the backstory stuff could have been simplified to make it more digestible and to, remove some of the strain that it has on the script of, like, we have to explain so much stuff about how this has all come to be and the different factions involved and the different, all there's a lot to it. And I do think it is a script writing problem because while I'm saying there's a lot to it and that they could have simplified it to make it better, I do believe there's probably better writers that could have taken the exact premise with the exact same amount of information and moving parts and made it work in a coherent script that was exciting to kind of learn the new details. I think the text scroll was the first red flag for me because when you put a big text scroll like that in, it's basically you saying, we don't believe we did a good enough job in the story to actually explain all this. So we're going to tell you all of this now, even though the script is going to repeat a lot of it in a way that was clearly intended to be how you learn it in the first place. And I think you get a little bit of a stiltiness because of that. And that's not to say that everything with a text scroll at the start or information at the start has made a mistake and they're putting a band-aid, if you will, on the script to try and make sure the audience understands something.
I mean, the movie kind of makes you question if it was even, accurate, like, for the most part, because it says it's just a Cold War, but, things are moving on onto other planets, and who knows if there's actually been nothing on Earth that's happened since everything's been, communications have been, whatever they want them to be. Like, I don't know, it kind of makes you question the... I
don't think that anything ever made me question it. Because they say it's been a Cold War on Earth. Mm-hmm. And for as far as we know, that's still true.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They're just moving on to other worlds.
And I think to go with some of the themes of war that's there, I would say that it makes sense that it's a Cold War on Earth because it goes back to that idea of sending troops away to somewhere else to go and fight, so the mainland and the general public don't know what the horrors of war are. Yeah, so I think that makes sense to me that it is that way.
Yeah, you're probably right now that I think about it. But also, I mean, to fight back a little, I mean, is it Terminator that has the text crawl with a narration that definitely doesn't need to be there?
Just because you were starting to speak there, I was just about to say not everything with a text crawl is doing it because they've failed in some way. Sometimes you have these high concepts, you do have to say, but the difference is with Terminator though, Terminator's text crawl is about maybe an eighth of the length of this one. Like, it's pretty simple. The machines rose, a war happens after the apocalypse, but the final fight wouldn't take place in the future, it would take place in our past. Boom,
it
done.
Is tough when you have science fiction or like even fantasy to like how do we set this up, because it's not a book. People aren't going to read about things as easily as they would, they don't really expect to read when they go to a movie. So how do we set things up? And maybe it is a bit overly complex in this one. It is a really long text crawl. But, Lord of the Rings gets away with, instead of doing a text crawl, to set up the world, they do just a prologue in the beginning of the film, which, sets up the series. And I definitely would prefer that to a text crawl. But this is a thing that we see a lot during the 80s and 90s. And I'm not really sure, why someone came up with that versus, I guess it's just cheaper than filming anything, but...
It is, and I don't always believe it's intentional though. For this one, I could believe that this wasn't planned, and it wasn't until they watched the cut of the film and went, we have to explain some of this because it's not coming across clearly in the way that the characters... Because good writing, a good script, even in a complex world, will gradually introduce one part at a time so that the audience gets it and understands, so that by the time you get to, say, the end of the first act, you have a really good understanding and foothold of what the world is. So you understand the story. Which is actually partly why I don't like fantasy that much, because I feel that fantasy always overcomplicates it, because it's got its own words for everything, every group, every place. There's too much of it. The beauty of science fiction is you get to use a lot more of modern terminology in your descriptions of things, and names that make a bit more sense based on just things we already know, yada yada yada. I think that's why sci-fi generally works better for me than fantasy, other than just the general aesthetic of it. Just I like it more. But from a writing perspective, that's the kind of the one main difference that I really note a lot of the time. And I think here this is an attempt to clear up the fact that the script doesn't do a good enough job on its own, which is funny because there is a whole scene when they does leave with the rookie, like I mentioned earlier. There is a very long scene when they're looking out at some of the old buildings and mining equipment, where Peter Weller just starts talking about how everything started and how we went on strike and it was like 4 years of like nothing, and then the war started, and he really went into it. I really felt the start of this movie really like under its own weight of just all these concepts that it was trying to introduce, but I felt like just slow down a bit, take it slow, let me start to care about each of these things one by one as you're introducing them. There's ways to do it, I guess.
I mean, I agree that the text crawl is a bit much. It's just too much at once, and then we get exposition anyway, but through dialogue. But again, it just could have been like an afterthought, Dark City has it also, and it definitely doesn't need it, because that's what Kiefer Sutherland's character is there for, is to tell you the world constantly, but they still gave us the text crawl. And I believe that one was like, it's too confusing, the science fiction stuff, so just make sure you put in a text crawl in the beginning. At least I don't have to read it, because Peter Weller reads it for me.
Yeah, well, I almost wonder if they wanted to do narration tacked on like Blade Runner, but Peter Weller said, no, that'll take too much time, I'm not doing it. Okay, how about just one reading of like a couple of paragraphs? Will you do that? He's like, okay.
He's definitely the best actor in the film.
I mean, obviously he is. I don't think he's that good in this movie, though. Like, his performance in this versus like the good movies that he's in, like, there is a clear distinct difference. He is phoning it in here.
I believe that he has the hots for this woman.
He has that vibe that like a Bruce Willis does when he's in some cheap movie, or it's a star who's in some knockoff thing and is just kind of going through the motions because he's there.
Yeah, but he's always done B movies. I think RoboCop was just his exception, honestly.
I mean, I'm not denying that he's always done B movies. That's besides the point.
That's his wheelhouse.
Well, so he doesn't have to try? He could just show up and...
I think he is trying. I think this is his acting. Like, Peter Weller's like doesn't have a lot of range. Like, he plays intense guy, and that's about it.
Okay. So the main journey of the film, like, they go out, they run into a kid, like a 10-year-old kid or whatever it is, who's all wrapped up and bundled for the cold. And it's like, wait, how are you out here? How did you survive? Because the screamers should have...
Who are you? Why is there a child here even?
Should have torn you apart like you were nothing. But the kid doesn't want to leave them, so they sort of take him along, and... there's a little bit here or there. Like, the rookie's got like a VR like pair of glasses he's watching porn on at one point that Peter Weller's annoyed and stomps on them.
Yeah, it's just their entertainment systems are weird. They have the glasses that are just MTV through a tunnel, and then the TVs that we see in the beginning are just like a projection, but you can walk through them. And I'm like, that's a really annoying way to watch something that people just walk through to get their sandwiches.
So there's a little bit of hijinks with them as a pair on this journey, but they get to the NEB base and there's a bit of tension, but the immediately the first thing these NEB guys do is they shoot the kid. So it's quite it seems like a sort of dark moment for like a few seconds, And then when Peter Weller like crawls over after he's dove to check on the kid, he finds out that the kid's not a human, that the kid's actually a robot. He's actually a screamer who has taken like an outer body of a human. And there's some of the exposition that was spouted on the way here is that streamers, after the first like designs came to the planet and they set them up, they basically make themselves. Like they set up the system underground and they're self-automated. So it's like they're evolving, and they've now made these kids that can infiltrate. And that's what we learn from these other characters that they interact with in a minute when they go inside with them, is that their entire squad of NEBs, like there's only these two guys left, because the rest of their team all get killed because this kid came in and was a sleeper agent effectively and then killed them all. So it's like, okay, all right, so right away you're like, okay, so our main base, the Alliance base, is under threat. That's going to be the thing. Like, is this happening there on the way back? And there's actually like a little hint that it is, because when he's trying to talk to his friend on the radio at one point, you only hear parts of it, but he says something like, "Oh, there's some weird kid here" or something like that. There's like a little line that implies that someone new showed up. To sort of, and this is where I was getting like Terminator vibes. Because it was making me think of the Future War stuff in Terminator, where Kyle's talking about how at first they had rubber skin and they were easy to spot, but then the proper like living tissue versions came out.
I like the idea of making a child, though. That's something that Terminator movies never went to. Like, someone super innocent and like he even like has a sweet voice and like says, "Can you take me with you?" Like,
yeah, no, it's very
me to die.
It's very manipulative, and it is worth mentioning here, because before someone says this in the comments, because I know someone will if I don't point this out, is that in Terminator there's actually a credit at the end that says, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's, "We acknowledge the works of Philip K. Dick." I think it was Philip, maybe it was Harlan Ellison. I think it was Philip K. Dick though. No, I think it was Harlan Ellison that I'm thinking about it. I think I'm mixing my sci-fi writers up.
Yeah.
Anyway,
androids are very much Philip K. Dick, right? He sort of did that. I mean, robots and humanoid robots, I imagine, would be more Asimov. And Harlan Ellison, I'm not sure. I think he was just, maybe there was a short story that was kind of closer to Terminator that he wrote.
Yeah, it was Harlan Ellison. I was right. Well, I was right the second time at least. That's what I was saying. No, I was mixing up in my head and think it was Philip K. Dick, because what I was about to say is just put a disclaimer that I understand that the reason why that happened in Terminator is because there was some similarities between something Harlan Ellison has written in the past, and Cameron's always said that he never took it from that, but like they acknowledged the works of it. Like that was like a legal thing. They put it in the credits to say we acknowledge that there's some similarities with this other thing, but that's what it is. I was pointing that out.
He had a dream.
But I was pointing that out because I mistakenly misremembered that as Philip K. Dick, and I was going to put it in there as a disclaimer. It doesn't really matter at this point because it's not Philip K. Dick, but this did make me think of Terminator, and particularly when Kyle's talking about how they infiltrated their bases in the future is what made me think of. So, like, don't get me wrong, the movie did get a little bit more interesting here when it started to interest the idea of like kids who are being used to infiltrate and like then kill everyone. I was like, okay, that's kind of creepy. There's something to that concept.
Yeah, the fact that they look like real humans that are indistinguishable from actual humans, but inside they're just like these, like it's just the mechanic shop just put in. It's like a car when you open it up,
Yeah,
it's kind of funny, but. I mean, they're doing the best they can with the science and the technology that they have in the 90s.
I might not really have a problem with how it looked when you see it inside.
I like the way it looks, yeah. It's like the Lonely from the episode of The Twilight Zone, where it looks like a real woman, and then you open it up and it's just all these gears and, really retro looking stuff. I like that too.
But basically, they want to go see High Command. This place they end up in is not their base, though. It's actually this woman who runs it, who's the love interest. So we get introduced to her. Immediately, there's just some, like, they're trying to be cool and badass with each other, but her name's Hanson.
She likes to drink real scotch. Or whiskey.
Yes. So they bond a little bit. Meanwhile, you've got this guy who... The aggressive guy reminded me of TJ Miller. That's who he looked like to me.
I guess I could see that. I mean, his voice is so much different.
Oh, his voice is different.
TJ Miller, I get a vibe of like stoner. I don't get that from this guy. But he reminded me of the villain in the Annihilators movie, who's just like that guy. I think was a little bit better, a lot better actually. But he kind of reminded me of that, where he's just like, I'm just bad. You don't know my past. I've been to prison, man. I'll shank you. Like he'll kind of try hard. He's definitely the worst part of the film.
But so she takes them to like the NEB base. Through some tunnels, which obviously are just some tunnels they found somewhere that they could use to like oh, this is the future, this is the underground tunnels. But they get to the base, and there is a set here for this. It looks a bit cheap, but they've got a laser machine. They've got like those, the lines of lasers that you get at concerts. They've got one of those, so to give it a bit of a sci-fi look. Mm-hmm. But they get there and everyone's dead, and it's like, oh, one of these kids, one of the Davids, I think they called them, has done this, and that's when we get this cool stop motion, like little robot thing come in. It's like a screamer that's evolved into like a... Oh, it's not dog shape per se, but it's kind of a dog size of like this metallic...
Looks like an opossum.
Sure, yeah, kind of possumy, I guess, in terms of shape. But with buzzsaws and shit, and is very dangerous. So there's a lot of the characters here of them like being quiet and hiding behind, almost Jurassic Park-esque, like in the kitchen, like hiding behind the counters and things like that.
Did you think of that Black Mirror episode at all with Crocodile? Not Crocodile. The one where it's like the dog, like... Yeah,
it's the robot dog, the black and white episode, yeah. No, I didn't when I was watching it,
Metalhead.
But yeah. Now you've mentioned it, yes, I can see the comparison.
Maybe again, I mean, that one was very much about like, I don't know if it's about weapons of war, but it was about trusting too much in AI and the mistakes that man makes when it thinks it's God, who tries to play God.
It's a shame because there's a lot of these, like, there's a lot of individual things in this movie that seem like, this may be a fun B movie if you just kind of focused on like hiding from robots and like building up tension from that. But it's over like before it even really starts. There's a couple of, like maybe a minute of them hiding, and then the robot sees one of them and they just blast it with the big shotgun thing, and that's it. It's over. Oh, okay. So it wasn't actually that much of a... It was fun seeing the stop motion effect of this, little robot thing going around, but it didn't really feel like it really capitalized on it all that much to me, which is a shame. I think the best idea in the movie, which is kind of a combination of a little bit of Terminator and a little bit of The Thing, which is the idea that we don't know for sure if these people around us are actually human or robots. And it becomes this question of like, how can we prove it? And is there any way to prove it that's other than just cutting someone open and having a look and seeing what they are inside? And it builds up to this moment where the cowardly guy that's in this like group they've ran into, right? Because there's three people. There's the aggressive guy, there's the cowardly guy, and there's the woman. The cowardly guy is constantly being scared and constantly asking for help and things like that. And there's a theory that there's a third type of like screamer that's not the kid, but there's like someone who'll pretend to be injured and ask for help, so that they'll lull you into a false insecurity, and then they'll strike. And the aggressive guy decides that he suspects that the cowardly guy, who it turns out he doesn't know him that well, like he's not known him for long, he's only just met him recently. He suspects that he's a screamer, so he throws a knife at him and kills him. And then Peter Weller walks up, pulls out the knife, and it's covered in blood, making him look like he's just murdered an innocent person. And it does sort of start this like, okay, but we're playing with this idea now that maybe...
Paranoia.
Yeah, paranoia. Someone might actually be a screamer. Someone might be a robot. How do we deal with that? And, like, the sad part of this is that you could almost, like, you don't necessarily need the big, like, outside planet stuff and all the journey and all that to do that story. Like, I mean, if you look at The Thing was set in just, this one base.
It's basically an alien world, though, right? They're in, like, the Antarctic.
Well, yeah, but like this is set in the one place. It's the one building, effectively. You can do the story of paranoia in a much more confined thing, and you can get a lot out of it. Now, admittedly, if you do that, maybe you are just basically redoing The Thing at that point. But I guess the reason why I'm saying this is that it kind of felt like there could be more to play with of like trusting who is and who isn't possibly a machine, and who is actually a person. But I think the movie telegraphs every time it's about to reveal someone's actually a robot. It's kind of painfully obvious that when they make the assumption here that blood proves you're not a robot, I immediately had the thought, well, these kids were already far more evolved than what you expect from a streamer. So who's to say that they can't also just have blood as well? Like, that was the first thought I had.
That wasn't my thought. I thought, okay, well, it's probably the woman or the mean guy. My brain said it was the woman because of the red herrings that were planted. But also they said that, okay, the screamers that we see in the ground in the beginning of the film are type 1. And we see that the child is type 3. And then they say, well, there is a type 2. We already know what it is. It's a soldier who pretends to be hurt, and so to lull you over there in a false sense of security and then kill you. But we don't know if there's a type 4 or 5 or 6 or anything like that. All we know are the 3. So it would stand to reason that type 2, the one that we don't know yet, or the one that we think is a soldier, is between, is not as advanced as the child. So there probably wouldn't be blood. You know what I mean? Because blood would be in like the type 4, which turns out to be true.
Oh, sure, but like, who says that any of these are a type 2 though, necessarily? Like,
well, that's what the movie is suggesting from, what's given, is that Peter Weller's looking through the computer, he sees that the kid is type 3, and he's like, what's type 2? What's type 2? And then, he gets pulled away. So the type 2 is the mystery. We could be like, oh yeah, but like there could be a type 4, a secret fourth one that we just don't know about yet. And you could think about that, and obviously you did, and I want to say I did too, but I don't know if that's true.
it was just like, I think from this point on, because the movie was pretty, I don't know, hollow, I guess, it just felt like the obvious thing to do was to sort of twist that, like that the woman was going to be an android or a robot or whatever you might call her. And I think, which is fine, like that as a plot concept is fine. And they set up, obviously, once they get back to the base, and immediately there's something wrong with what they're saying over the walkie-talkie, and Peter Weller kind of catches on, oh wait, like something's not right here, because he starts talking about the music he was listening to as if it was a person he knows, and like his friend starts saying like, yeah, I talked to him.
Giovanni.
Yeah, I talked to him just yesterday, and he's like, oh shit. And you get this big shot where the door opens and a lot of these David kids just sort of start walking out together. And it's like, okay, all right. That's, the fun little idea.
Base is gone. Friends are all dead.
But, and it's not that he's friend, of course, because now obviously his friend, Chuck, he is a screamer. It's not that he was always a streamer. It's that the streamers now have started taking people's faces and, mimicking them effectively. Which I believe is what happens to the mean guy, because the mean guy, after basically Peter Weller fires this like mini nuke at the base to kill all the robots. After he does that, they wake up and like the angry guy is like yelling for help, and then that's how the rookie gets killed, because he pulls the rookie in, he kills him.
Yeah.
It's not
immediate, like, no, he said he's a soldier that calls for help. Don't fall for it.
Yeah, obviously, and they set that up. To be fair, the movie set that up, so we were right to kind of feel suspicious of that as an idea. I don't think the movie was saying that he was always a robot, though. I think it's just saying that in this like time they've been passed out, that they have taken his face and.
Oh, I actually didn't pick up on that, but that's cool.
I thought that's what they were saying, just because everything previously with him kind of felt like. It felt like it didn't make sense if he was also a robot, whereas obviously the woman was the whole time, and that's like the big reveal later on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's basically just him and her left now. Peter Weller's with her. He cuts out the tag on the angry guy, and instead of having a number on it or whatever, it's just got a symbol that he can't read. It's like a different language almost like the robots have got their own language now, and they've evolved and they've changed.
Forming a society, you might say.
They are, yes. So basically, the only plan now is to get to this evacuation pod that's on the planet somewhere for like the person in charge, meaning him, is for him to evacuate if everything goes to shit. And sure enough, they go to that. It's a bit of a trek. They have to travel for a bit, and they get to it. And basically, the Chuck screamer shows up and starts fighting him. But then we get the reveal that another one of the love interest, Hansen, a second Hansen, walks around the corner, and this is after Peter Weller and her have kissed, they've hugged, they've
Well, he was going to sacrifice himself for her too.
He was, yeah. And she's like saying, no, you should go. And obviously part of that, once we find out the truth, is that she actually thinks that he should go because he's the human, and that and the idea that she's actually developed feelings for him, but obviously he'll hate her for what she is. But when the second Hansen starts trying to kill him, she jumps in to help him, and she actually gets like a really comical death. She gets like the second Hansen punches her through the stomach and like rips out part of her like insides, which is really over the top and silly and fun and all the rest of it.
More, please.
Yeah, I mean, there was moments like that where it felt like, okay, you're actually leaning into your B moviness now. Like, everything else, you're sort of like reaching too high for what you can actually pull off. This is the sort of thing you can do.
This maneuver was perfected in what is it? Demon Knights, when Billy Zane punches the guy through the head.
Oh, Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knights, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Peter Weller's pissed, but then he actually has an emotional goodbye with her, because after she's like lying there dying, he's like, you saved me, you learned to love. And it's that classic robot thing where they've been the villains for the whole movie, but now he has to question the idea that maybe they are also just new life now, right?
Yeah.
The death I wanted to complain about earlier is the sort of the evil Hansen, the one that just killed her. She gets killed when the test thrust for this rocket goes off and burns her. The effect for this is just downright stupid, because you get this like shot of her like she's like all burned and like singed, and she's just like a sort of like plastic figure almost.
She looks like a Barbie doll that's being melted.
Yeah, but then she just sort of pauses, and then after a couple of seconds, the plastic, if you will, explodes separately.
Love it.
Like, why? Why does she explode? She's a T-1000 getting shot by the bullet after being frozen.
I like it. I don't know. It was I mean, she's full of, a whole bunch of electronics. Maybe there's gasoline in there, and the jet fuel or all the jet exhaust finally ignites that, she explodes. She's a robot.
It's just stupid. I think, and obviously the ending is just Peter Weller getting in the rocket.
Maybe she's made with beryllium, and maybe beryllium is explosive. It probably is if it's a source of energy.
Anyway, Peter Weller, he gets in the rocket, he flies away, right? I don't care, right? I just don't give a shit, okay? I almost swore there in a way that I don't swear on YouTube. Right? I feel like this review has been you, like, trying to defend every little thing somehow, some way.
I enjoyed the moment at the end, the idea, I mean, again, the high sci-fi concept of, like, the robots have been trying to mimic humans for so long that they accidentally also mimic the ability to fall in love. And now they have their own little society growing. And what are they? Are they human now? Or should we consider them? Should they have rights? This whole like thing gets set up.
Okay.
It makes sense of that he would also write, do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. And also, you didn't really say the ending of the movie.
What's the real ending of the movie? What have I glossed over?
Well, he's flying towards Earth, and he takes off his wristband because he's off the planet now, and the teddy bear starts to move.
Oh yeah, sorry. There's the little tease at the end that maybe there's a screamer on the ship with them. Yes, and that might.
And it's headed to Earth.
Yeah, sure, right. There's a little tease. All of what you just said is fine from a conceptual level, but the problem is that Hansen as a character is so underdeveloped that she has basically no character other than she drinks whiskey, and it's kind of tough. That is her entire character, and her entire relationship with Peter Weller feels so rushed. They met each other like yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. They're not at a point yet. There's not enough that happens between them that feels like... See after the others die, after the big fight where he shoots the mini rocket or whatever, and they wake up the next day, and then that's them on their own and to go off in this next part of the journey to get to the rocket to leave. This section here, all of a sudden, this is where the music starts being really sort of like emotional and dramatic, as if like, is this meant to feel like a great romance or something between these two? Because they had a little bit of sexual tension when they first met.
They're Romeo and Juliet now. They shouldn't be together. But warring factions. But love doesn't work that way. Love makes its own path, man.
The movie just pretends that this is a big deal and that we should care about these two, and gives you this ending like we've been on this journey with them where we really care about them being a pair. Like they've been there for each other. Like she's been there for him and he's been there for her. And we get that kind of like shared kind of growing bond over. But because like they've not done anything where like I actually feel like a sense of like shock and betrayal, or a feeling of like oh, I deep down I know she's probably going to turn out to be a robot and it's going to be really sad when she does. It doesn't make me care enough about them and their relationship. You know, when you look at other robot and human pairings in movies, even if it's not necessarily like romantic or even Ex Machina, which you brought up earlier, like in that it's not the same thing, of course, where they fall in love and then at the end like he finds out she's a robot. It's very different, right? But immediately there is some kind of an attraction, and immediately there's kind of a weird chemistry between them that builds, and you're sort of questioning the whole time, like, is this something real or natural? Is this like him just trying to figure her out? Is this her trying to manipulate him for her own like escape or whatever? Like all these like questions, and all of it's there throughout, but all the whole time you're thinking about the possible outcomes because of like this, what this relationship is. It's not a great comparison because obviously we know she's a robot from the start, right? but I don't think this works in the way that it's done in the movie, because one, her character is so undercooked and she's barely get any scenes before we're supposed to care and be emotional, but also because there's not like a chance to sort of anticipate or care about what the outcome is. So when it just thrusts this outcome upon you at the end of the movie, it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's fine and all, but I mean, if anything, like maybe it's trying to copy the crappy romance in Blade Runner, where I also didn't feel anything between the two characters. Maybe there's an argument to be had there.
You say copy, but it's the same author, so I mean, one of them could have inspired the other. One story, I mean, could have been like, I could do this again in a different way.
I don't know how much of Blade Runner's in like Philip K. Dick's story though. Like I have no idea how much of that's just the movie.
Yeah, I should probably explore this more.
Yeah, I don't think their relationship in this movie earns any of the emotion that the movie's pretending that it has by the end. Like I think her character, I mean, all the characters are basically really thin. Peter Weller obviously gets the most. I would say the Rookie is the second most like rounded character, in that we spend enough time with him that we get to kind of know at least what his faults are and who he is. He's not an interesting character by any means, like I'm not saying that, but like at least there's enough time spent with him that you understand him enough that maybe you'll feel something when he dies. Hansen as a character though is she's meant to be kind of the badass chick that clearly the main guy's into.
She even gets naked in front of him like it's no big deal.
Yeah, she doesn't care. That's how cool she is, like just sort of eye-rolly little things like that. And Peter Weller has a really bad line at one point where he just like in the middle of the conversation goes, "God damn, you're beautiful."
I liked it. She's standing there topless in front of him, and he's been in a bunker. He's expressed to his friend how he doesn't have like anybody really at home waiting for him, or I think he also talked about like something not working out with somebody previously. I don't know if it's like an ex-wife or just a long-term relationship.
Yeah, there's some dialogue at the start, that mentions those. Yeah.
And there's a beautiful woman just like takes her top off to give herself a sponge bath of just her breast in front of him. Like, no big deal. Have some whiskey. I was surprised we didn't see him. I mean, we technically see them when they get all burnt up.
Yeah, but they're not real. That's not actual boobs when you see them. Yeah, none of that answers the point of the line being bad though. Like I'm not disputing that he is attracted to a woman or that he is raunchy and ready to go. Like I'm not saying
I don't know, I liked it. Like it matched his character.
I guess. I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. It felt like a cheesy line to me that was put in, and her doing this in front of him just felt like a really, again, a cheap way to say, look how cool she is. Like she doesn't care.
Yeah, it's like Starship Troopers future,
Yeah. So yeah. relationship is hollow. Did not work for me. So all the emotion at the end was just nothing. It was yeah, and that's the sad part is you can see the emotional beats that it's playing at the end. It's what this is trying to be is that this robot has sacrificed herself and saved him, and now he has to struggle with that as he lives on in his life, and potentially doesn't if the screamer on the ship is there and kills him or kills Earth or whatever. But like that's kind of the moral like at the end here, at least from the what is life kind of part. Yeah, the movie's just kind of lame. A lot of it's just really lame.
Okay. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think it's one that I liked. I didn't expect to like it that much, but I actually did like it, and I like the big ideas in it, and yeah, maybe the execution leaves something to be desired, and actually maybe it would be a decent remake if somebody else, had a hand at it. Someone who's actually good at making things feel creepy, and maybe now it's too difficult to do because we see these kind of tropes already in other films, but maybe it could make a good remake.
One of the things that look lame, actually, I'm just thinking about it, is the Davids, the kids, when they open their mouth and scream.
There's a little bit of a special effect, yeah. Yeah,
there's like a visual effect on their mouth to make it look a bit wider, and there's like stuff in like like metal parts in their mouth. And you just hear like the whirling scream,
They do dub like a woman screaming over it. I think a woman anyway.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the sound itself, but but it is very machine-like. It's more like a saw blade going with some augmented elements on top of it than it is an actual scream, if you will.
Yeah.
It's really sad to me how many ideas in this movie that I do like, because I just think there's like the idea of like someone's a machine and you can't trust who it is. So there's the paranoia side. That's probably the most interesting part of the movie in terms of concepts. But then the concepts of using like machines using kids to infiltrate and kill all the adults, that's kind of interesting. I wish there was something more done about that and being scared of children. Imagine like instead of like having the emotional thing with Hansen, what if over the course of this movie, like the kid stayed with them as they went on this journey, right? And then he didn't find out till the end that the kid was a screamer, and there was this like sort of like moment where he had to choose like, do I trust the kid, or now that I know he might be like working against me, do I kill him? Like there could be like a really big impactful decision there.
I guess so. I'm nervous that if that movie existed, you would just compare it to Aliens the whole time. Trying to be Ripley and Newt.
But it wouldn't be Ripley and Newt though.
I mean, I did enjoy that they just blasted the kid out of nowhere and like sent him flying.
Yeah, I don't think anything in this movie really works. It's all just too undercooked, and it's not that the concepts don't exist somewhere. It's not that the ideas aren't somewhere good. I think there's maybe too many of them shoved into the one story, and that hurts it a little bit. I think if you want to do this thing where he has this moment at the end where he's accepting that this robot that he would have hated for just being a robot actually cared about him, and he has to wrestle with that. I think you can get to that point, but you have to give me more of a story between the two of them that makes me care about what he thinks of her in the first hand. Because up until this point, all she really was the cool badass love interest that you may have sex with before the movie's over. That was the extent of it. There was no real connection that you feel at an emotional level, Alternatively, this idea of all these like screamers underground jumping out, you could have like a Tremors style movie with that, and that's a fun idea.
I was getting some Tremors vibes. I like the idea of the screamers like saving the body parts, like they would take the body parts and like pull them underground and stuff.
Which I guess makes sense later in the sense that they are probably trying to rebuild like human tissue, and they're taking samples for that's probably why they're doing that. Yeah.
I think that's neat.
So that's an idea. And obviously the core idea that in war you keep making new weapons, and this weapon's literally evolving and is going to kill everyone. The comparisons to like the nuclear like arms race might have ended up killing everyone, especially since this was written during the Cold War. The original story.
You make weapons designed to kill people better and better. Eventually, you just make a way to kill all humans. you know, it's a classic story, I suppose.
Yes. But I don't think this movie is good at telling any of these stories. I want to make that clear. There's like flickers of fun here or there, or fun visuals here or there with the stop motion effects, but the characters are not likable. The direction is uninspired and just kind of ho-hum. It's very workmanlike. Even Peter Weller's phoning it in, and it wastes several good ideas. So
Sounds like you're ready to rate it.
I am ready to rate it. Are you ready to rate it?
I sure am.
Okay, well, rate it then.
I was going to go with a 6.5. I don't think I'm going to knock it up because I know you're going to give it a low rating. So I'm going to say it's a 7.
Your rating shouldn't have nothing to do with my rating. It should be just your rating on its own.
Too bad. 7 out of 10. I recommend it.
Well, yes. Well, that is the very forgiving rating of this movie. I will give it its correct rating, which is a 4 out of 10.
Yikes, that is cruel.
Well, it's a 4. What do you want from?
All right, whatever.
It's a 4. 4 fingers.
I was trying to figure out a way to flip the bird, but I can't without it just being a 6. But it's a 7. 7 out of 10.
4. It's a 4. All right, there you go. That's Screamers, which, you know, I don't recommend checking it out. But if you want to go and see it for the sake of just being involved in the conversation, then knock yourself out. But there you go. That is that. Tara, why don't you tell everyone about Patreon?
That's right, Peter. If you guys enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/mildfuzztv, where you can find bonus reviews for more B-rated films, like probably Screamers 2. It's going to be there one day.
No rush.
We recently finished the Tremors sequels, so all of those are over there. We also did all the Transfers movies. We mentioned Full Moon Pictures earlier. It's actually quite a lot of films over there now. And you also get access to the horror movie podcast reviews too. That has a big library. So there's a bunch of cool stuff there for a minimum of $3 a month. And at $5, you also get our new show, which is the Ace Movie Meltdown, where we just once a month talk about things that we've watched that are not sci-fi related, and you can get to know us a little bit better and what kind of things we're interested in. So if that interests you, please head over and check that out. And thank you.
Yeah, let's keep supporting all the content. I'll take this time to thank our Patreon producers of Tyler Hess and the Palisades, David Sharp, Bornow, Christopher Moy, David Brown, Al Tradesman, and Alison M. Fordyce. They are all producers, which is one of the higher tiers of Patreon. You can also support us by hitting super thanks button on YouTube, or liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications, or sharing just the show out with people. All those things do help us out. Next time on the show, we are taking a break from 90s season. I almost said 70s season there. We're taking a break from 90s season for 1 week because the vote winner of the month is not a 90s movie. The vote winner that was voted for on Patreon last month is the first Star Wars movie. So we'll be tangenting from the 90s for 1 week, and we'll be back out in the 90s after that.
Sounds like we're starting a new franchise.
We are starting a new franchise, yes.
And we are starting with number 1, which is number 4.
It's just number 1. I don't buy into this whole renumbering bollocks that was done.
What about retitling?
I don't like that either. It's Star Wars.
So it's just Star Wars then. That's all we're reviewing. It's Star Wars.
None of this A New Hope bollocks.
All right. Well, see if you can find a cut that is the original cut.
I'm not going to go.
I might know a guy.
I'm not going to go hunting for the original cut. I don't care enough. I want to watch it in like 4K, so I will watch it in the bastardized version that it exists in just now. But
yeah, I'll watch the one I have on Disney Plus.
Yeah, but yeah. So Star Wars coming next week. I imagine that'll be a fairly lively discussion, given that it's Star Wars. So look forward to that. That's the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer at Salsa.